The word jumbo can roughly be understood to mean a large specimen of its kind, and it's often posited that the word entered the English language thanks to an elephant. While this is certainly a really nice story, the truth is a little bit more complicated. First things first. Though etymologists are in agreement that the word jumbo, in specific reference to something that is quite big, was popularized by an African bull elephant called Jumbo, there is evidence that the word existed long before this elephant was ever born. In the latter half of the 19th century, Jumbo the elephant was arguably one of the most famous animals on Earth. Throughout his life as a zoo attraction and later as a circus performer, he was estimated to have been seen by millions of people. While nobody is exactly sure when Jumbo was born, it is believed that he was captured as a young calf in 1860, somewhere in East Africa, after his mother was shot by hunters. In 1862, after traveling hundreds of miles on foot and by boat, Jumbo was sold to a large botanical garden in France called the Jardin des Plantes. Jumbo's life at the Jardin des Plantes was reportedly not so great. Along with awful conditions, Jumbo was constantly overshadowed by the garden's two other elephant attractions, Castor and Pollux, who themselves are famous for being eaten during the 1870 siege of Paris. In 1865, Jumbo was sold to the London Zoo after years of negotiations that were spearheaded by the zoo's superintendent, Abraham Bartlett. Bartlett had supposedly been very annoyed to learn that the French had managed to get their hands on the first African elephant specimen that set foot in Europe. Indeed, he was so aggrieved that he eventually agreed to send the Jardin des Plantes the following list of animals in return for the calf: a rhino, a jackal, 2 eagles, a pair of dingoes, a possum, and a kangaroo. When the young elephant finally arrived in London, Bartlett immediately recognized that it had been poorly looked after and handed its care over to his most talented zookeeper, Matthew Scott. Scott, who was noted for having a knack at understanding animals, quickly bonded with the elephants, which was under his expert care. Jumbo eventually grew to become one of the largest elephants that the world has ever known, standing at an impressive 12 feet tall in his prime, which was later advertised as over 13 feet tall. Jumbo's massive size and gentle temperament eventually led to him being bought by the legendary circus owner P.T. Barnum in 1882. The sale of Jumbo caused a considerable stir in England, and the London Zoo was heavily criticized by the public for daring to sell him. You see, during his time at the London Zoo, Jumbo had become quite a celebrity and boasted such high-profile fans as Queen Victoria, who personally petitioned the zoo not to sell him. The zoo, however, was worried about Jumbo entering what is known as must, a condition that can affect bull elephants, resulting in an increased production of testosterone and unpredictable and violent behavior. Jumbo's sheer size meant that if he entered must, the zoo could have had a rather large problem on their hands. He had proven before that he was more than capable of destroying the doors to his cage, and the chains that were supposed to hold him in place were also little match for him. The zoo therefore decided that this simply wasn't worth the risk. Once he got to America, Jumbo's arrival was milked for all that it was worth by Barnum, who had his image emblazoned on everything that he could find. Jumbo proved to be one of the most popular attractions at Barnum Zoo, and he was billed by the entrepreneur as the biggest elephant in the world. Sadly, though, just 3 years later, Jumbo was killed after being struck by a train and dragged along for about 300 feet before the train came to a stop. Reportedly, as he was taking his dying breaths, he used his trunk to hold the hand of his longtime trainer. Ever the showman, expert marketeer, and businessman, Barnum had Jumbo's remains preserved and toured with them for many years. Okay, so let's get back to the topic at hand. While it is true that Jumbo was a humongous specimen even by elephant standards, and also that after his death his name came to be synonymous with anything large, the word Jumbo did exist before this. As early as 1823, the word jumbo was a slang term used to describe a big, clumsy person, animal, or thing. Unfortunately, we're unable to trace the meaning back much further than that because it originated in slang speech, which is so often notoriously poorly documented. One origin theory was posited by a slang dictionary that was published in 1823 called, and we're really not making this up, Slang, a Dictionary of the Turf, the Ring, the Chase, the Pit, of Bon Ton, and the Varieties of Life, forming the completest and most authentic lexicon ballatronicum hitherto offered to the notice of the sporting world for elucidating words and phrases that are necessarily or purposely cramp mutative and unintelligible outside their respective spheres, interspersed with anecdotes and whimsies, with tart quotations and rum ones, with examples, proofs, and monetary precepts useful and proper for novices, flats, and yokels. And boy, that must have looked bad on the front of a book. As to the origin story they came up with, they state it perhaps derived from the phrase Mumbo-Jumbo. Mumbo-Jumbo, which most of you will understand as a synonym for something that is meaningless or intentionally convoluted and confusing, derives, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, from the name of a grotesque idol said to have been worshipped by some tribes. It is often claimed that this was Mumbo-Jumbo. It is believed that the word was adopted by the English language during the 18th century and that it may have been used as a derogatory term to refer to the so-called incomprehensible languages that were used by Africans. How the singular word jumbo came to be derived from this phrase isn't precisely known, though. As for how Jumbo the elephant got his name in the first place, this is similarly not known. One theory is that Jumbo was given his name by Abraham Bartlett, who reportedly just liked the sound of the word, evidenced by the fact that he once called a gorilla Mumbo. Another theory suggests that it was actually his trainer Matthew Scott who named him Jumbo after the slang term because of his clumsy gait and his heavy-set frame. And now for some bonus facts. Despite his large size, Jumbo was known to be a very calm elephant as long as his trainer was around, and he gave thousands of children rides on his back throughout his life. Now for another bonus fact, Matthew Scott and Jumbo shared a very close relationship throughout their time together, and Jumbo would reportedly throw tantrums whenever Scott went home. When Jumbo was bought by P.T. Barnum, Scott was hired to be his keeper, simply because he was the only one that Jumbo would listen to. Abraham Bartlett was so terrified at the thought of Jumbo going on a rampage if something happened to Scott that he wrote a letter to the Zoological Society asking for them to provide him with a method of killing Jumbo if Scott was ever injured. As mentioned, reportedly, as Jumbo was taking his dying breaths, he used his trunk to hold the hand of Scott. Incidentally, according to Matthew Scott, he would share a bottle of beer with Jumbo every night. Scott claimed one night that when he drank the bottle himself and promptly fell asleep before giving Jumbo his share, Jumbo gently lifted Scott out of his bed with his trunk and put him on the floor in front of him. When Scott woke up, he realized his mistake and promptly got Jumbo a fresh beer. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, do give us a thumbs up below. If you're looking for something else to watch right now, why not check out a new channel we've put together called Fact Quickie. It's hosted by my occasional co-host on this channel, Davin, and it has very short videos about the 1 minute mark looking at basically quick facts. There you go. That's why it's called Fact Quickie. Check it out through the link in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.